A rich woman paid actors to rob her, but when a struggling single dad risked everything to save her, his heroic response forced her to confess the shocking truth she'd been hiding. What happens when a fake crime uncovers a very real secret that could destroy them both? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, scattering red and gold leaves across the parking lot of Miller's Grocery. Evelyn Harrow sat perfectly still in her Mercedes, her manicured fingers tapping nervously against the leather steering wheel. Through her windshield, she watched two men lingering near the shopping cart return, their casual poses not quite matching their darting eyes. Her heart raced as she checked her diamond-studded watch for the third time. Everything had to be perfect. She'd chosen this time carefully, when the lot would be busy enough for witnesses, but not so crowded as to be dangerous. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her pearl necklace. A beat-up pickup truck pulled into the space 2 rows over. Through her side mirror, Evelyn observed a tall, broad-shouldered man step out, his worn work boots and faded jeans, telling a story of hard times. Daniel Carter's face showed the weariness of someone carrying too many burdens, but his eyes softened as he helped his young daughter from the passenger seat. "Daddy, can we get those special cookies today?" Lily's voice carried across the lot, sweet and clear. "The ones with the sparkly sugar on top." Daniel ruffled her hair, his smile gentle but tinged with something that made Evelyn's chest tighten. "We'll see, sweetheart. Let's stick to the list today, okay?" Evelyn took a deep breath, grabbed her designer purse, and stepped out of her car. The autumn air felt crisp against her face as she straightened her expensive wool coat. She began walking toward the store entrance, her heels clicking against the pavement in a steady rhythm that matched her racing pulse. Right on cue, the two men burst into action. Their footsteps pounded behind her as they rushed forward, reaching for her purse. Evelyn let out a practiced scream, making sure it was loud enough to draw attention. "Hey!" Daniel's voice boomed across the parking lot. "Get away from her!" Without hesitation, he charged forward, his protective instincts taking over. "Lily, stay behind the truck!" he shouted over his shoulder as he ran. The first robber yanked harder at Evelyn's purse, but Daniel's construction, hardened body slammed into him like a freight train. They tumbled to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The second man stumbled backward, clearly not expecting such fierce resistance. Shoppers froze in place, grocery bags dropping to the pavement. Someone yelled, "Call the police!" A woman clutched her children close, hurrying them toward her minivan. Daniel grappled with the would-be thief, his face red with effort. "You okay, ma'am?" he called out to Evelyn between breaths. Evelyn stood trembling, one hand pressed to her chest. The performance came easily now, adrenaline making her staged fear feel almost real. Yes, I think so," she gasped. The second man grabbed his partner's arm. "Come on, man, let's go." They scrambled to their feet and took off running, disappearing around the corner of the building. Lily's small voice cut through the chaos. "Daddy?" She peeked out from behind the truck, her eyes wide with fear. "It's okay, baby." Daniel pushed himself up, wincing slightly. "Everything's okay now." He hurried back to his daughter, scooping her up in his strong arms. She buried her face in his neck, her small body shaking. The wail of approaching sirens filled the air. A crowd had gathered, people pointing and whispering. Evelyn sank to her knees, allowing herself to look appropriately distressed. Her designer stockings snagged on the rough pavement, but she barely noticed. "Did you see that?" A teenage boy was already holding up his phone, probably having caught the whole thing on video. "That guy just took down a robber. Someone get her a chair," a middle-aged woman called out, rushing to Evelyn's side. The poor dears had quite a shock. Daniel held Lily close, murmuring soft reassurances into her hair. "Shh, we're safe. The bad men are gone." His eyes met Evelyn's across the parking lot, full of genuine concern. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need anything?" The crowd pressed closer, voices overlapping. "He's a hero. Did anyone get the license plate? Look how he protected his little girl. Isn't that the handyman? Carter, right?" Evelyn watched as Daniel's cheeks flushed at the attention. He shifted uncomfortably, still focused on comforting his daughter. The growing admiration in the onlookers' faces was exactly what Evelyn had hoped for. But seeing his raw paternal devotion, the genuine selflessness of his actions, made something twist painfully in her chest. Police cars pulled into the lot, lights flashing. Lily lifted her head from her father's shoulder, tear tracks visible on her cheeks. "Are you a superhero now, Daddy?" Daniel managed a warm chuckle, though his arms tightened protectively around her. "No, sweetie, just your regular old dad doing what's right." The crowd continued to grow as people emerged from the store, drawn by the commotion. They formed a loose circle around Daniel and Evelyn, their murmurs of admiration growing louder. A store employee hurried out with a folding chair, helping Evelyn into it. "My hero," Evelyn proclaimed loudly enough for everyone to hear, her voice quavering perfectly. She clutched her rescued purse to her chest, watching as all eyes turned to Daniel. He stood there awkwardly, still holding his daughter, looking nothing like the polished heroes from movies, and yet somehow all the more heroic for it. The police officers stepped forward, their notebooks ready, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The crowd's excitement was palpable, phones recording, voices buzzing with the thrill of having witnessed real-life bravery. And at the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, a simple man who had done what he thought was right, not knowing he was playing directly into Evelyn Harrow's carefully orchestrated plan. Daniel stirred the pot of leftover spaghetti on his worn electric stove, the noodles sticking together slightly as he scooped them onto two mismatched plates. The kitchen was small but clean, with crayon drawings decorating the refrigerator and a vase of wilting flowers Lily had picked from their tiny backyard. And then, bam! Lily's voice rang out from her perch at the kitchen table. "You were like a real superhero, Daddy, just like in the movies." Her feet swung back and forth, barely reaching the floor, as she recreated the scene with dramatic hand gestures. "It wasn't quite like that, sweetheart," Daniel said, setting her plate in front of her. The sauce was a little thin. He'd added water to make it stretch, but Lily didn't seem to notice. "I just did what anyone would do." "Nuh-uh," Lily insisted around a mouthful of pasta. "Tommy's dad was there too, and he just stood and watched. But you were brave." Daniel was about to remind her not to talk with her mouth full when a knock at the door interrupted them. He opened it to find Mrs. Peterson from next door, holding a steaming casserole dish. "Oh, Daniel," she gushed, pressing the dish into his hands. "We saw you on the evening news. Such bravery. I just had to bring over my famous tuna noodle casserole." "That's really not necessary," Daniel started, but she was already patting his arm. "Nonsense. It's the least I can do for our neighborhood hero." Before he could close the door, Mr. Jenkins from across the street appeared with his wife, both beaming with pride. "There he is," Mr. Jenkins called out. "The man of the hour." Daniel's cheeks flushed red. "Please, it wasn't." More neighbors gathered on his small front porch, each offering congratulations and kind words. Some brought food, others just wanted to shake his hand. Daniel stood awkwardly in the doorway, overwhelmed by the attention. Lily bounced around behind him, proudly announcing to everyone, "That's my daddy. He's a real hero." The crowd finally began to disperse when a news van pulled up, its lights illuminating the modest house. A reporter in a crisp blazer approached, microphone in hand, with a cameraman following close behind. "Mr. Carter, Channel 5 News. Could we get a few words about your heroic actions today?" Daniel instinctively stepped back, pulling Lily behind him. "I appreciate the interest, but I'm just trying to have dinner with my daughter." "But sir, Mrs. Harrow herself praised your actions. She called you her guardian angel in our earlier interview. The public wants to know more about the brave single father who—" "Please," Daniel said firmly, "not tonight. My daughter needs her dinner." Back inside, Lily had already cleared a space on their cluttered coffee table for Mrs. Peterson's casserole. "Look, Daddy, more food, and it smells really good." Daniel smiled, grateful for the generosity, but uncomfortable with the attention. They finished their spaghetti while watching the local news, where Evelyn Harrow's elegant figure filled the screen. "I don't know what would have happened if that brave man hadn't intervened," Evelyn was saying, her voice steady but emotional. "Mr. Carter showed extraordinary courage. In these times, it's rare to find someone willing to put themselves at risk for a stranger." Lily had settled on the living room floor with her crayons, tongue stuck out in concentration as she drew. Daniel watched her work, her small hands carefully selecting each color. "Look!" She held up the paper proudly. There he was, drawn in wobbly lines, wearing a red cape and a big smile. "It's you, Daddy. I'm going to hang it up at school tomorrow." "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Daniel said, his throat tight with emotion. "But you know I'm not really a superhero, right?" "You're my superhero," Lily declared, adding a final star to the corner of her drawing. Later, after 3 bedtime stories and 2 glasses of water, Daniel finally got Lily tucked into bed. Her room was small but cozy, with twinkling fairy lights strung across the ceiling, a garage sale find that had made her squeal with delight. "Daddy?" Lily mumbled sleepily as he kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby? I'm proud of you." Daniel's heart swelled. He adjusted her blanket, making sure her favorite stuffed elephant was tucked in beside her. "I love you, Lily Pad. Sweet dreams." In the quiet of the hallway, Daniel leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the day's events. He closed his eyes, whispering a quiet prayer. Thank you for keeping us safe today. Thank you for this roof over our heads, for my beautiful daughter, for the kindness of neighbors. Please help me be worthy of their faith in me. Across town, in her sprawling mansion on Highland Avenue, Evelyn Harrow sat alone at her vanity. The crystal wine glass in her hand caught the light, casting red shadows across her face in the mirror. Her carefully maintained appearance had begun to slip, makeup slightly smudged, silver hair falling from its perfect coif. She stared at her reflection, seeing past the elegant clothes and expensive jewelry to the truth beneath. The guilt sat heavy in her stomach, burning worse than the wine. In the mirror, she watched a tear slip down her cheek, leaving a dark trail of mascara in its wake. The autumn morning air felt crisp as Daniel walked back from Lily's school, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn denim jacket. Fallen leaves crunched beneath his work boots with each step. His mind wandered to the stack of handyman jobs he needed to complete this week, calculating if they'd cover this month's bills. A sleek black car pulled up beside him, its polished surface reflecting the morning sunday. The window rolled down smoothly, revealing a uniformed chauffeur. "Mr. Carter?" The chauffeur's voice was formal but kind. "Mrs. Harrow asked me to deliver this to you personally." Daniel accepted the cream-colored envelope, its paper thick and expensive beneath his calloused fingers. Inside, elegant handwriting invited him to dinner at the Harrow estate that evening. "I'll wait for your response, sir," the chauffeur said. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, thinking of Lily. "My daughter? Mrs. Harrow has arranged for a trusted babysitter if you'd like." Several hours later, Daniel stood before the massive oak doors of the Harrow mansion, wearing his best button-down shirt and the only pair of dress pants he owned. The door opened to reveal a butler who led him through a marble foyer into a formal dining room that could have fit his entire apartment. Evelyn Harrow rose from her chair, elegant in a navy dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Daniel, I'm so pleased you could join me." Her smile seemed genuine, though something flickered behind her eyes. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Harrow." Daniel shifted uncomfortably as a server pulled out his chair. "Please, call me Evelyn." She gestured to the elaborate place settings. "I hope you like roast duck." The first course arrived, a delicate soup Daniel couldn't name. He carefully mimicked Evelyn's movements with the silverware, determined not to embarrass himself. "How is your charming daughter?" Evelyn asked, her voice warming at the mention of Lily. "She's good. Still drawing pictures of yesterday." Daniel smiled despite his nervousness. "She's convinced I'm some kind of superhero now. Children have such pure hearts." Evelyn's expression softened. "You know, Daniel, what you did yesterday was truly remarkable. Most people wouldn't have risked themselves for a stranger." Daniel focused on his soup. "Anyone would have helped." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "They wouldn't have. That's precisely why I asked you here tonight." She nodded to the butler, who placed an envelope beside Daniel's plate. Daniel's stomach tightened as he realized what it must contain. "Mrs. Harrow, Evelyn, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept money for doing what's right. This isn't payment for your bravery." Evelyn leaned forward. "This is an investment in your daughter's future. I understand you've been struggling since losing your construction job." Daniel's face flushed. "We get by. A father's pride is admirable. But please, let me do this for Lily. Consider it a scholarship fund." Her voice grew quieter. "I never had children of my own. My Harold and I, well, it wasn't meant to be." The main course arrived, and Daniel noticed how Evelyn's eyes darted to the empty chair at the head of the table. The enormous dining room suddenly felt heavy with absence. "How long has your husband been gone?" Daniel asked gently. 3 years next month." Evelyn's perfectly manicured fingers traced the stem of her wine glass. "This house, it echoes now. 38 years of marriage, and suddenly there's just silence." Daniel recognized the pain in her voice, different from his own abandonment, but pain nonetheless. "I'm sorry." "Oh, don't be." Evelyn straightened her shoulders. "I keep busy with charity work, garden club meetings, hospital board functions, but sometimes." She paused, vulnerability crossing her features. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone would notice if I simply disappeared." "Your community would notice," Daniel said. "All those people you help through your charity work." A strange expression flickered across Evelyn's face. She took a long sip of wine before speaking again. "You're very kind, Daniel, but tell me about your work. What did you do in construction?" They talked through the rest of dinner, their conversation growing surprisingly comfortable. Daniel found himself sharing stories about Lily, about his dreams of starting his own contracting business someday. Evelyn spoke of her travels with Harold, of the local causes she supported. As the evening drew to a close, Evelyn walked Daniel to the door herself. She pressed the envelope into his hands. "Please. For Lily." Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Thank you. This means more than you know." After Daniel left, Evelyn climbed the grand staircase to her bedroom alone. Her heels clicked against marble, each step echoing in the empty house. She paused before her dresser, where a silver-framed photograph showed Harold beaming in his garden, secateurs in hand, surrounded by his beloved roses. Her fingers trembled as she touched the frame. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered to the smiling face of her late husband, her voice barely audible in the vast, silent room. The doorbell chimed through Daniel's small house just as he finished helping Lily with her homework. He wasn't expecting visitors, especially not at 7 in the evening. Opening the door, he found Evelyn Harrow standing there, elegant as always in her pearl gray sweater and dark slacks. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. "I wanted to thank you again. And..." She paused, something uncertain flickering across her face. "I brought something for Lily." Before Daniel could respond, Lily came bounding down the hallway. "Daddy, who's at the..." Her eyes lit up when she saw Evelyn. "Mrs. Harrow, did you come to see Daddy's cape?" Daniel felt his cheeks warm. "Lily, honey, my cape?" Evelyn stepped inside, her designer boots looking oddly out of place on their worn welcome mat. "I drew pictures!" Lily grabbed Evelyn's hand, pulling her toward the kitchen with the fearless enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. "See? Daddy's a superhero now. I made him a red cape because that's the best color for heroes." The kitchen walls were decorated with Lily's artwork, crude but heartfelt drawings showing a stick figure with a flowing cape tackling shadowy bad guys. Daniel watched as Evelyn studied each picture, her face softening at Lily's detailed explanations. "And this one shows when you were scared," Lily pointed to another drawing. "But Daddy saved you, just like Superman." Evelyn's hand trembled as she touched the corner of the paper. "These are wonderful, dear," her voice cracked slightly. "You're quite the artist." Daniel noticed the change in her demeanor. "Lily, why don't you go get ready for bed? Brush your teeth, and I'll be up in a few minutes to read your story." "But I want to show Mrs. Harrow my other drawings." "Tomorrow's a school day, sweetheart. Say goodnight to Mrs. Harrow." Lily pouted but gave Evelyn a quick hug. "Will you come see my drawings again?" "Of course, dear." Evelyn's smile looked strained. She waited until Lily's footsteps disappeared upstairs before turning to Daniel. "Could we step outside for a moment?" The night air was cool on the small front porch. Cricket songs filled the silence as Evelyn gripped the wooden railing, her knuckles white. Daniel stood quietly, sensing something wasn't right. "I can't," Evelyn's voice wavered. "I can't bear this anymore." She turned to face him, tears gathering in her eyes. "The robbery, it wasn't real." Daniel stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "What?" "I hired those men." The words tumbled out in a rush. "They were actors. I paid them to stage the whole thing." She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. The world seemed to tilt beneath Daniel's feet. "You? What?" "I know. It's horrible. Inexcusable." Tears streaked her carefully applied makeup. "After Harold died, I felt so invisible. The charity boards, the social circles, they all moved on without me. I thought if something dramatic happened, people would." She shook her head. "It sounds insane now. I wanted to feel important again, to test if anyone would help, to make the papers maybe. I never expected you to actually intervene." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice came out in a harsh whisper. "The whole town thinks I'm some kind of hero. My daughter," he gestured sharply toward the house. "My daughter thinks I'm Superman because of your game?" "I'm so sorry," Evelyn pleaded. "When you jumped in to help, I couldn't stop it. The media attention, the praise, it all snowballed. And then seeing how it helped you and Lily?" "Helped us?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "By building everything on a lie? By making my daughter proud of something that never actually happened? Please, let me make it right. I can help you financially, set up a trust for Lily's education." "Stop." Daniel stepped back, his voice shaking with anger. "Just stop. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you." He moved toward the door. "You should leave." "Daniel, please, leave." He hadn't meant to raise his voice, but the betrayal felt like a physical pain in his chest. Evelyn hesitated, then slowly made her way down the porch steps. Daniel watched her walk to her car, her shoulders hunched in defeat. Once she was gone, he slammed the door harder than he meant to. His heart hammered against his ribs as he leaned against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. From the kitchen, Lily's drawings seemed to mock him. The crude crayon hero with his bright red cape smiled down from the refrigerator door, a celebration of a lie. The morning sun cast long shadows across Daniel's cluttered workshop as he fumbled with a broken cabinet hinge. His phone buzzed for the 5th time that morning, Evelyn's number again. With a heavy sigh, he turned back to his work, but the screwdriver slipped, scratching the wood. "Everything okay, Carter?" his boss called from across the room. "Yeah, just distracted today," Daniel replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. The weight of last night's revelation pressed down on him like a physical burden. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. "Please meet me at Bailey's Cafe at 2 p.m. We need to talk." Daniel stared at the message, his jaw tight. After what felt like an eternity, he typed back a single word. "Fine." The hours crawled by until his lunch break. Bailey's Cafe sat tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, its faded awning providing shade from the afternoon sunday. Through the window, he could see Evelyn already seated in a corner booth, her elegant posture at odds with the cafe's casual atmosphere. The bell above the door tinkled as Daniel entered. A few regular customers looked up, offering warm smiles and nods. The town hero effect still hadn't worn off. The thought made his stomach turn. "Daniel," Evelyn said softly as he slid into the booth across from her. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd slept as poorly as he had. "Thank you for coming." "Make it quick," Daniel replied, his voice low but firm. "I have to get back to work." A waitress approached with a cheerful smile, but Daniel waved her off with a polite, "Just water, thanks." Evelyn's perfectly manicured fingers fidgeted with her napkin. "I know what I did was terrible," she began. "But please, I'm begging you, don't expose what I told you last night." Daniel leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you understand what you've done? The whole town thinks I'm some kind of hero. My daughter," his voice caught. "Lily draws pictures of me saving people. It's all based on a lie." "It wasn't all a lie," Evelyn protested. "You didn't know it was staged. You acted purely out of courage and kindness. That part was real." The waitress returned with Daniel's water. He took a long sip, using the moment to gather his thoughts. "Mrs. Harrow," he said finally, "I grew up being taught that the truth always comes out eventually. And when it does, it's gonna hurt a lot of people, not just you and me." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. I know, and I've been sick about it all night. But if this comes out now," she dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, "the scandal would destroy everything I've built, everything my late husband worked for." "You should have thought about that before hiring fake robbers," Daniel said sharply. An elderly couple walked past their booth, and both Daniel and Evelyn fell silent until they passed. The cafe's quiet jazz music filled the awkward pause. "What if?" Evelyn hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "What if I could make it right? Not just sweep it under the rug, but truly make amends." Daniel crossed his arms. "I'm listening. I have resources, connections. I could do real good in this community. Help people who actually need it, not just create artificial drama for attention." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "The scholarship fund I started for Lily? I could expand it to help other single parents. The community center needs renovation. The food bank always needs support. And that makes everything okay?" Daniel asked. But his tone had softened slightly. "No," Evelyn admitted. "Nothing makes it okay. But it would be better than destroying everything with the truth now. Please, Daniel, give me a chance to prove myself." Daniel stared out the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. A young mother struggled with a stroller, and an elderly man immediately stepped forward to help her. Such a simple act of kindness. Real kindness. "Lily can never know," he said finally, turning back to Evelyn. "My daughter's faith in me. It's all I have sometimes. If I agree to keep your secret, you have to promise me she'll never find out." "Of course," Evelyn nodded quickly. "Absolutely. And no more donations directly to us," Daniel added firmly. "I don't want your guilt money. Whatever good you do needs to be for the whole community." "I understand," Evelyn said, relief flooding her features. "Thank you, Daniel. I promise you won't regret this." "I already do," he muttered, standing up. He left his water untouched on the table. "Just do what's right from now on, Mrs. Harrow. That's all I ask." As Daniel walked toward the door, he heard Evelyn's quiet voice behind him. "I will prove myself." He didn't turn back to acknowledge her words. letting the cafe door close behind him with a final jingle of the bell. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Daniel stood outside Thompson Construction, staring at the gleaming office building. A week had passed since his tense cafe meeting with Evelyn, and now here he was, clutching a recommendation letter that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. The company's HR manager had called him personally, mentioning an urgent need for someone with his exact skills. Inside, Daniel shifted in the leather chair across from Mr. Thompson himself, a burly man with kind eyes. "Your experience is exactly what we're looking for," Thompson said, reviewing Daniel's portfolio. "And that recommendation from the Harrow Foundation? Very impressive." Daniel's throat tightened at the mention of Evelyn's family foundation, but he managed a polite smile. "I'm just looking for steady work, sir, to provide for my daughter. A single father, right? I respect that." Thompson extended his hand. "Welcome aboard. You start Monday." Walking to his truck afterward, Daniel's emotions warred between gratitude and discomfort. His phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "Hope the interview went well. The food pantry needs help unloading donations this afternoon if you're free." He found her there an hour later, her usually pristine clothes replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her silver hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She was organizing canned goods with genuine focus, checking expiration dates, and arranging items by type. "You actually showed up," Daniel said, causing her to turn. "I made a promise." Evelyn's voice was quiet but firm. "These people need help, real help, not the kind of attention-seeking nonsense I pulled before." They worked side by side, sorting donations in comfortable silence. Daniel couldn't help but notice how the other volunteers warmed to Evelyn's practical efficiency and unexpected humility. She knew exactly how to organize the inventory system and had already drafted plans to expand the pantry's reach. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Daniel threw himself into his new construction job, while Evelyn split her time between charity work and surprising appearances at Lily's school events. She helped Lily with her reading, sharing stories about famous women in history that made the little girl's eyes shine with possibility. "Mrs. Harrow taught me about Amelia Earhart today." Lily bounced in her car seat one afternoon. "She flew planes all by herself, Daddy. Can I be a pilot?" Daniel caught Evelyn's gentle smile in his rearview mirror. She'd offered them a ride when his truck had broken down. "You can be anything you want, sweetheart," he said, and meant it. At the food pantry, Evelyn worked tirelessly, often staying late to help single mothers pick out groceries or connecting struggling families with job resources. Daniel watched her transformation with cautious amazement. The brittle, desperate woman who had staged her own robbery was being replaced by someone who genuinely cared about making a difference. "Why did you really do it?" he asked her one evening as they packed food boxes. "The robbery, I mean." Evelyn's hands stilled on a can of soup. "After Richard died, I felt invisible. All our society friends disappeared. The charity boards I served on seemed so superficial." She met his eyes. "I thought if I could prove someone would still help a stranger, it might mean something. I never expected to learn what real help, real connection, actually looks like." 2 weeks after Daniel started his new job, Evelyn invited them to dinner at her mansion. Lily gasped at the grand staircase and crystal chandeliers, but it was the cozy kitchen that won her heart. Evelyn had set up cookie decorating supplies on the marble island, and soon all three of them were covered in sprinkles and frosting. "My mom never does fun stuff like this," Lily said innocently, adding another handful of sprinkles to her cookie. Daniel tensed, but Evelyn smoothly redirected. "Well, then we'll just have to make extra cookies for you to take home, won't we?" Later, they moved to the formal dining room, where Evelyn had prepared a simple meal of spaghetti and meatballs, Lily's favorite. The little girl chatted excitedly about school, her father's new job, and her dreams of flying planes. Daniel noticed how Evelyn hung on every word, her eyes soft with genuine affection. "Can we come back next week?" Lily asked as they finished their dessert. "Mrs. Harrow makes the best cookies, and she promised to show me her garden." "We'll see, sweetheart," Daniel said, catching Evelyn's expression. Behind her warm smile, he saw the shadow of guilt that never quite left her eyes. The weight of their shared secret hung between them, even as Lily's laughter echoed through the high-ceilinged room. "Thank you for dinner," he said, as they prepared to leave, Lily clutching a container of decorated cookies. Evelyn stood in her doorway, arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth of the evening. "Thank you for giving me a chance to do better," she replied softly, watching them walk to the car under the gathering dusk. The late October evening sparkled with promise as Daniel adjusted his borrowed tie in the mirror. The invitation to the Riverside Community Foundation's annual gala sat on his dresser, its gold lettering catching the light. honoring local heroes. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed down the lapels of his one good suit, purchased years ago for a job interview. "Daddy, how do I look?" Lily twirled into his room, her blue party dress floating around her like a cloud. "Mrs. Henderson from next door had helped style her hair into neat braids, decorated with matching blue ribbons. Like a princess," Daniel said, his throat tight with emotion. He knelt to straighten her sparkly headband. "Are you excited about tonight?" "Uh-huh." Lily bounced on her toes. "Jenny from school says there's going to be fancy desserts and everything, and you're going to get an award for being brave." Daniel's smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Remember what we talked about? Being honored is nice, but helping others is what really matters," Lily finished, rolling her eyes good-naturedly. "I know, Daddy." The community center had been transformed for the gala. Twinkling lights draped the ceiling, and round tables dotted with centerpieces filled the usually plain gymnasium. Daniel recognized Evelyn's touch in the elegant decorations, though her name was conspicuously absent from the program. As they entered, Lily clutching his hand, familiar faces turned to greet them. Mrs. Thompson, the construction company owner's wife, hurried over to compliment Lily's dress. Chief Rogers from the police department clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Even Mr. Wilson, who used to barely acknowledge Daniel when he fixed his fence, made a point of shaking his hand. "Carter, over here," called Dave from the construction site, waving from a table near the front. "Saved you seats?" Daniel led Lily through the crowd, nodding and smiling at the constant greetings. He caught a glimpse of Evelyn in a dark corner, wearing a simple black dress that helped her blend into the shadows. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a small, encouraging nod. The evening unfolded like a dream. The food was fancy but delicious. Lily's eyes went wide at the chocolate fountain for dessert. People kept stopping by their table to chat, treating Daniel like he belonged among them. Not once did anyone mention his past struggles or whisper about that poor handyman. Mayor Roberts took the podium after dinner, his voice filling the room. "Tonight, we celebrate the everyday heroes among us. People who remind us that courage isn't about wearing a cape or having special powers. Sometimes, it's about simply doing what's right when the moment calls for it." Daniel felt Lily squeeze his hand under the table as the mayor continued. 2 months ago, Daniel Carter witnessed a crime in progress and didn't hesitate to act. His quick thinking and bravery protected not only the victim, but inspired our entire community. The spotlight found their table, and Daniel blinked against its brightness. Lily beamed up at him, her face glowing with pride. "Mr. Carter, would you please join me on stage?" Daniel's legs felt wooden as he stood. Dave gave him a thumbs up, and Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. As he made his way to the podium, he caught another glimpse of Evelyn. She had moved closer, standing at the edge of the crowd. In the dim light, he could see tears shining on her cheeks, but she was smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. The mayor presented him with a plaque and a check from the foundation. "For your daughter's education fund," he explained, and the audience applauded. Daniel stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. He hadn't prepared a speech, but looking out at the sea of friendly faces, the words came naturally. "Thank you all so much. I'm not used to this kind of attention." A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd. "That day at the grocery store, I didn't think about being brave. I just saw someone who needed help, and I did what I hope anyone would do." His eyes found Lily, who was practically bouncing in her seat. "My daughter once asked me what makes someone a hero. I told her it's not about fighting bad guys or saving the day. It's about showing up for people. It's about building things that last, whether that's buildings, relationships, or a community." The applause was thunderous. As Daniel returned to his seat, people reached out to pat his back and shake his hand. Lily launched herself into his arms the moment he sat down. "That was the best speech ever," she declared, hugging him tight. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and dessert. Lily charmed everyone she met, proudly telling them, "That's my daddy up there on the plaque." Daniel watched her twirl on the dance floor with Dave's daughter, her blue dress spinning like a flower in the wind. As the crowd began to thin, Evelyn finally approached their table. She looked elegant but subdued, nothing like her usual commanding presence. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter," she said formally, but her eyes were warm. "The foundation was honored to recognize your courage." "Mrs. Harrow," Lily exclaimed, "did you see my daddy's speech? Wasn't it amazing?" "It certainly was," Evelyn agreed softly. "Your father is a very special person." Later that night, after carrying a sleeping Lily from the car to her bed, Daniel sat on the edge of her mattress, watching her peaceful face. She stirred slightly as he tucked her in. "Daddy?" she mumbled, her eyes fluttering open. "That was the best night ever." "It sure was, princess. I'm so proud you're my daddy," she said, fighting sleep. "You're my hero. Not just because of the grocery store, but because you're you." Daniel's heart swelled as he kissed her forehead. "I love you, sweetheart. Get some sleep." In his own room, Daniel carefully hung up his suit and placed the plaque on his dresser. The check was safely tucked away, enough for Lily's college fund to finally start growing. His new job was going well, the townspeople treated him with respect, and his daughter looked at him like he could do anything. For the first time in years, tomorrow didn't feel like another mountain to climb. It felt like a path opening up before him, full of possibility. The autumn wind whipped through the bare trees outside Evelyn Harrow's mansion as she settled into her favorite armchair with her morning tea. The past few weeks had been surprisingly peaceful. Her volunteer work at the food pantry gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years, and watching Daniel and Lily flourish brought genuine joy to her heart. The shrill ring of her phone shattered the quiet morning. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Mrs. Harrow?" A gravelly male voice sent an immediate chill down her spine. "Remember me? From your little performance?" Evelyn's hand trembled, causing tea to splash onto her silk blouse. "Who is this? Come on now. You hired me to play robber, remember?" "Well, I've been thinking, that job deserves a bonus." Her throat went dry. "We had an agreement. You were paid fairly." "Yeah, but that was before I saw you on the news, praising that construction worker like some kind of saint." The man's laugh was ugly. "Wonder what the papers would say if they knew the truth." "What do you want?" Evelyn whispered, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palm. $50,000, cash. Meet me at the empty parking lot behind the old movie theater at 2 o'clock today." He paused. "And Mrs. Harrow? Come alone, or everyone finds out what really happened that day." The line went dead. Evelyn sat frozen, her tea growing cold. She glanced at the grandfather clock in her study, 11:30 a.m. Just enough time to get to the bank. The drive to the bank felt surreal. Evelyn's usual confidence had vanished, replaced by a gnawing dread. The teller raised an eyebrow at her large withdrawal request, but didn't question it. Soon, Evelyn clutched a thick envelope, her life's latest mistake reduced to a stack of bills. The old movie theater stood abandoned at the edge of town, its faded marquee a ghost of better days. Evelyn parked her Mercedes in the empty lot behind it, hands clenched on the steering wheel. At exactly 2 o'clock, a beaten-up pickup truck pulled in. She recognized the driver immediately, the shorter of the two men she'd hired, the one Daniel hadn't tackled. He looked rougher now, unshaven and wearing a stained jacket. He smiled when she stepped out of her car, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Harrow, right on time." He held out his hand. "Let's make this quick." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the envelope. "How do I know you won't just come back for more?" "You don't." He shrugged. "But right now, this is your best option." What Evelyn didn't notice was Daniel's old truck parked across the street. He'd been driving to pick up supplies for a job when he spotted her familiar Mercedes turning into the lot. Something about her tense posture and this unlikely location made him slow down and watch. Through his windshield, Daniel saw Evelyn hand over an envelope to a scruffy-looking man. The exchange was quick, but the man's threatening stance and Evelyn's obvious fear were clear even from a distance. The pickup truck peeled out of the lot, leaving Evelyn standing alone, looking smaller than Daniel had ever seen her. Later that afternoon, Daniel stopped by Evelyn's house, telling himself he just wanted to discuss Lily's upcoming school event. Evelyn answered the door in a fresh outfit, her makeup perfect, but he noticed her hand shaking slightly as she invited him in. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked carefully, watching her pour coffee with less than her usual grace. "I was driving by the old theater district earlier." Evelyn's cup clattered against its saucer. "Oh, I haven't been in that area for ages. Such a shame how run down it's become." "That's funny," Daniel said quietly, "because I could have sworn I saw your car there, around 2 o'clock. You must be mistaken." Evelyn turned away, straightening some flowers in a vase. "I was at home all afternoon catching up on correspondence." Daniel stepped closer. "Evelyn, if you're in some kind of trouble, I said I was home." Her voice cracked slightly. "Please, Daniel, just leave it alone." He studied her for a long moment, noting the tension in her shoulders and the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "All right. But remember our agreement about honesty." After Daniel left, Evelyn sat in her car in the garage, unable to go back inside. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as tears finally broke through her carefully maintained composure. The weight of lies, old and new, pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She glanced at herself in the rearview mirror. The elegant facade she'd rebuilt so carefully was beginning to show cracks, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold it together. The blackmailer had her money, but her gut told her this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead as he measured a section of drywall. The steady work at Morrison Construction had been a blessing, giving him regular hours and decent pay. But something felt off today. The usual friendly chatter of his coworkers had turned to hushed whispers and sidelong glances. "I heard someone say it was all fake." A voice drifted from around the corner. Daniel's hands froze mid-measurement. "The robbery? No way," another worker responded. "But Tim's cousin knows a guy who—" Daniel's chest tightened. He set down his tape measure, trying to steady his breathing. More whispers floated through the air, each one like a knife in his gut. "Said there was money exchanged. Saw the widow in a parking lot. Something's not right." The drywall seemed to swim before his eyes. He grabbed his water bottle, taking a long drink to calm his nerves. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. During lunch break, Daniel sat alone in his truck, phone in hand. He stared at Evelyn's number for a long moment before pressing dial. She answered on the second ring. "Daniel, is everything all right? We need to talk," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Now, I'm in the middle of—" "Now, Evelyn." Silence hung between them before she sighed. "Meet me at Riverside Park in 20 minutes. The park was deserted when Daniel arrived. Evelyn sat on a bench overlooking the water, her elegant posture a stark contrast to the tension in her shoulders. She didn't look up as Daniel approached. "Tell me about the man in the parking lot," he said, remaining standing. "The one you gave money to." Evelyn's fingers twisted in her lap. "You saw that? Tell me the truth." For once, she closed her eyes, looking suddenly old and fragile. "One of the men I hired. He came back, demanding more money. He threatened to expose everything." Daniel's fists clenched. "So you paid him off?" "I had to protect us both," she whispered. "To protect what we've built." "What we've built?" Daniel's laugh was harsh. "You mean the lie we've been living? The story everyone believes about how I'm some kind of hero?" "You are a hero," Evelyn said fiercely. "That night you didn't know it was staged. You acted on pure instinct to protect a stranger. That makes you more of a hero than—" "Stop it!" Daniel's voice echoed across the water. A few birds took flight, startled. "Just stop. People are talking, Evelyn. They're asking questions. How long before this whole house of cards comes crashing down?" Evelyn stood, reaching for his arm. "Please, Daniel, don't abandon me now. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right. The food pantry, the construction job, everything I've done. Everything you've done has been to ease your own conscience." Daniel cut in, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He could see the genuine fear in her eyes, the trembling of her hands. "That's not true," she whispered. "I care about you and Lily. You've shown me what real kindness looks like, what family could be." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. The anger still burned in his chest, but beneath it was something else. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. He thought of how empty Evelyn's massive house felt, how her eyes lit up when Lily showed her drawings or told her stories about school. "What are we going to do?" he asked finally. "I'll handle the blackmailer," Evelyn said. "I promise. Just don't give up on me, please." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I made a promise to keep your secret, and I'll honor that. But this can't go on forever, Evelyn. Sooner or later, the truth always comes out." That evening, Daniel stood in Lily's doorway, watching his daughter sleep. Her favorite stuffed elephant was tucked under one arm, and her dark hair spread across the pillow like a fan. On her wall hung the drawing she'd made of him as a superhero, complete with a cape and a big smile. His throat felt tight as he looked at it. Lily's world was so simple, so full of absolute truths. In her eyes, he was a hero who had saved someone in need. How would she feel when she learned it was all based on a lie? Would she ever trust him again? Daniel moved quietly into the room, pulling her blanket up higher. Lily stirred slightly but didn't wake. In the soft glow of her nightlight, she looked so innocent, so certain of her place in the world and her father's role in it. He touched her hair gently, his heart heavy with the weight of secrets and promises. Everything he'd done, every choice he'd made, had been to protect her and give her a better life. But now those very choices threatened to destroy the trust between them. Daniel backed out of the room silently, closing the door with a soft click. He leaned against it, closing his eyes. The whispers from work echoed in his mind, mixed with Evelyn's desperate pleas and Lily's proud declarations about her daddy the hero. The truth was a time bomb, ticking away beneath their feet, and when it exploded, his daughter's innocent faith in him would be the first casualty. The morning paper landed on Daniel's doorstep with a thud that seemed to echo through his bones. His coffee mug froze halfway to his lips as he read the headline, "Local Hero's Story Questioned. Anonymous source claims grocery store robbery was staged." His hands trembled as he scanned the article. Words jumped out at him. Allegedly orchestrated. Unnamed source claims. Questioning the authenticity. The room spun slightly, and he had to sit down at the kitchen table. "Daddy?" Lily appeared in her school uniform, pink backpack clutched to her chest. "Why are you looking so worried?" Daniel quickly folded the newspaper. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Ready for school?" But it wasn't nothing. As they walked to school, he noticed the stares. Mrs. Peterson, who usually waved cheerfully from her garden, turned away when they passed. Two women outside the coffee shop stopped talking abruptly, their eyes following him with suspicion. "Look, isn't that the fraud?" The whispered words carried across the street, sharp as needles. Daniel pulled Lily closer, quickening their pace. At the school gates, he noticed parents gathering in small clusters, their heads bent together in conversation. When they saw him, they scattered like startled birds, avoiding eye contact. "Have a good day, sweetie," he managed, forcing a smile as Lily skipped inside. The workday wasn't any better. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from unknown numbers. Some called him a liar. Others demanded explanations. The local news station left 3 voicemails requesting comments on the developing story. During his lunch break, Daniel checked his email. His heart sank. The interview he'd scheduled with Riverside Construction, a promising position with better pay, had been canceled. The message was brief. "Due to recent developments, we've decided to pursue other candidates." Walking home that afternoon, a car honked aggressively as it passed. The driver yelled something about attention-seeking frauds. Daniel kept his head down, his shoulders hunched against the weight of accusation. Outside the grocery store, the very spot where everything had started, an elderly man recognized him. "Shame on you," he spat, "making us believe in heroes again, only to find out it was all fake." Daniel's phone rang. It was Evelyn. He ignored it, just as he'd ignored her last 5 calls. When he arrived at school to pick up Lily, the whispers had grown louder. A group of mothers huddled near the entrance, their eyes hard with judgment. One pulled her child away as Daniel approached. Lily emerged from the building, her usual bounce missing from her step. Her face was pinched with worry, so different from her normal after-school excitement. "Tommy said his mom told him you're a faker," she said quietly as they walked home. "She said you pretended to be brave when you weren't really." Lily looked up at him, her brown eyes wide and uncertain. "That's not true, is it, Daddy? You wouldn't lie." Daniel's throat closed up. How could he explain? How could he tell his 7-year-old daughter that the truth was so complicated, so tangled with promises and guilt and good intentions? "Lily, he started, but the words wouldn't come. At home, the phone kept ringing. More canceled opportunities, more accusations, more reporters wanting statements. Daniel unplugged it, but the silence felt worse somehow. Lily sat at the kitchen table, pushing her mac and cheese around her plate. The drawing she'd made of him as a superhero still hung on the fridge, but now it seemed to mock him. Every cape-wearing stick figure was a reminder of how far he'd fallen. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small. "You didn't answer my question before." About lying. Daniel stared at his untouched dinner, shame burning in his chest. The truth would break her heart. A lie would make him exactly what they were calling him. He couldn't bring himself to do either. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the walls. Daniel sat there, head buried in his hands, crushed by the weight of it all. He could feel Lily's eyes on him, waiting, watching, while her hero crumbled before her. The mac and cheese grew cold. The shadows lengthened across the kitchen floor, and still, Daniel sat there, unable to lift his head, unable to meet his daughter's gaze, unable to find words that would make any of this right. The iron gates of Evelyn's mansion loomed before Daniel like prison bars. His hands trembled as he pressed the intercom button, but no response came. Through the bars, he could see her silver Mercedes in the circular driveway, confirming she was home. "Evelyn!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the manicured lawn. "I know you're in there." Still nothing. Daniel's jaw clenched as he remembered Lily's tear-stained face from that morning, asking him why the other kids were calling him a liar. He spotted the gardener's entrance, a smaller gate left unlocked, and strode through it with purpose. The front door was solid oak, probably worth more than his car. He pounded on it with his fist. "You can't hide from this forever." Through the stained glass, he caught movement, a shadow retreating upstairs. That was enough. Daniel tried the handle and found it unlocked. The grand foyer welcomed him with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. But today it felt cold and hollow. "Evelyn," his voice bounced off the high ceilings. "We need to talk." He took the curved staircase 2 steps at a time, following the sound of rustling from above. The upper hallway stretched before him, lined with oil paintings and gilded frames. At the end, light spilled from beneath a door. Evelyn's study. Daniel burst in without knocking. Evelyn stood by the window in an expensive silk robe, her silver hair disheveled, an empty wine glass dangling from her fingers. She didn't turn around. "How dare you ignore me?" Daniel said, his voice shaking. "After everything that's happening." "I'm sorry," she whispered, still facing the window. I can't face it." "Can't face it?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "My daughter came home crying today. My reputation is in shreds. The whole town thinks I'm a fraud, and you're hiding in your mansion feeling sorry for yourself?" Evelyn's shoulders hunched. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen." Daniel's fist slammed against the mahogany desk, making her jump. "You used me! You used my daughter! We were just props in your little drama, weren't we? To make you feel important again?" Finally, Evelyn turned. Her face was streaked with mascara, her usual perfect composure shattered. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, her voice breaking. "To be invisible. To have everyone look through you like you're already dead." "Oh, I understand being invisible," Daniel shot back. "I was invisible for years, struggling to make ends meet, working my fingers to the bone. But at least I was honest." "I know." Evelyn collapsed into her leather chair, the wine glass slipping from her grip and rolling across the carpet. "I'm selfish. I'm horrible. When Charles died, I lost everything that mattered. Not just him, my purpose, my place in the world. I thought if I could create one moment of drama, of meaning, and look what it cost," Daniel said, his anger giving way to exhaustion. "Not just you, everyone around you. My daughter idolized me because of that fake rescue. Do you know what that feels like? To know her pride in me is based on a lie?" Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. "I've tried to make it right. The charity work, helping you get that job. It's not enough." Daniel's voice rose again. "The truth always comes out. Either you face it or it destroys us both. There's no middle ground anymore, Evelyn." She slid from the chair onto the floor, her silk robe pooling around her like spilled wine. Her sobs echoed in the vast room, all pretense stripped away. For the first time, Daniel saw not the wealthy widow, not the manipulator, but just a broken woman who'd lost her way. "I don't know how," she wept. "I don't know how to face everyone, to admit what I did." "You think I want to face them?" Daniel asked quietly. "You think I want to walk down the street and see the judgment in their eyes? But I have to, for Lily, and you have to face it too." Evelyn drew her knees to her chest, looking suddenly small against the backdrop of her grand study. Her crying had turned to deep, gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded inside her. "I'm so alone," she whispered between breaths. "I'm so terribly alone." Daniel stood over her, watching, as the proud woman he'd known crumbled into pieces on her expensive carpet. The setting sun through the window cast long shadows across the room, and in that moment, all the trappings of wealth, the antique furniture, the original paintings, the crystal decanters, seemed nothing more than empty decorations around a hollow life. Evelyn's shoulders shook as she confronted, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what she'd done and what she'd become. Her carefully constructed world was shattering, and there was nowhere left to hide from the truth that had finally caught up with her. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Mark's Church, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Daniel Carter sat in the last row, his work boots scuffing against the carpet as he waited. The familiar smell of old hymnals and furniture polish brought back memories of Sunday services with Lily, her small hand tucked safely in his. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and Evelyn Harrow stepped inside. She looked different here, smaller somehow, without her usual sophisticated armor. Her designer clothes seemed out of place against the humble surroundings, and her hands clutched her purse like a shield. "Thank you for meeting me here," Daniel said quietly, standing as she approached. The empty church amplified even their softest words. Evelyn nodded, her face pale. "I almost didn't come." She sank into the pew beside him, keeping careful distance between them. "I've been sitting in my house all night, thinking about everything that's happened. We need to fix this," Daniel said firmly. "Not just for me or Lily, but for you too." He gestured around the sanctuary. This feels like the right place to talk about it. Pastor John Miller emerged from his office, his weathered face, kind but serious. He'd known Daniel for years, watched Lily grow up, and even remembered Evelyn from the rare occasions she'd attended services after her husband's passing. "Mrs. Harrow," the pastor said gently, "Daniel called me this morning. He told me everything." Evelyn's shoulders stiffened. "Everything? The staged robbery, the consequences, all of it," Pastor John confirmed, settling into the pew in front of them and turning to face them. "But more importantly, he told me about your journey since then, your attempts to make amends, your growing friendship with his family." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. "It doesn't matter now. Everything's ruined." "Nothing's ruined beyond repair," Pastor John said, his voice steady and reassuring. "But the truth needs to come out, and it needs to come from you." "A public confession?" Evelyn whispered, horror creeping into her voice. "I can't. The humiliation, my reputation." Daniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Your reputation is already at stake, but more than that, my daughter's trust in me is at stake. Every day I don't tell her the truth, I'm lying to her." "The town hall holds monthly meetings," Pastor John suggested. "It's where the community comes together to discuss important matters. That would be an appropriate place for this." Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. "They'll hate me, everything I've built, every relationship." "Yes, some people will be angry," Pastor John acknowledged. "But think about what you've learned these past weeks. About genuine connection, about doing good not for show, but because it's right. The food pantry," Daniel added softly. "Those kids you've been tutoring, the scholarship fund you started, that's the real you, Evelyn, not this lie we're all trapped in." Sunlight shifted through the windows, painting Evelyn's face in gentle colors. She closed her eyes, remembering Lily's drawings, the child's innocent trust, Daniel's integrity even in the face of accusations. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Pastor John reached across and took her hand. "Fear is natural, but courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being afraid." Daniel pulled out his phone, showing her the town hall schedule. "There's a meeting tomorrow evening. The whole community will be there because they're discussing the new park project." Evelyn stared at the screen, her breath coming in short gasps. "Tomorrow? So soon?" "The longer we wait, the more damage is done," Daniel said firmly. "The rumors are already spreading. Better they hear the truth from you than lies from others." Pastor John stood, his presence calming. "I'll be there to support you both. And Evelyn, remember, confession is the first step toward redemption. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter." They spent the next hour planning what Evelyn would say, how to approach the difficult truth without excuses. The morning light grew stronger, warming the church interior, as if offering its own encouragement. Finally, Evelyn squared her shoulders. "I'll do it," she said, her voice stronger now. "I owe you that much, Daniel, and I owe it to myself." They walked together toward the church entrance, their footsteps echoing in the sacred space. At the door, Daniel turned to Evelyn. She looked fragile but determined, like a delicate branch bending in the wind but refusing to break. He reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "This will hurt," he warned, his voice compassionate despite everything. "But it's the only way forward." The town hall's double doors kept swinging open as more people filed in, their winter coats dusted with early December snow. The grand meeting room, with its high ceiling and dark wood panels, hadn't seen such a crowd in years. Wooden chairs scraped against the floor as residents settled in, their whispers echoing off the walls. Daniel stood in a small side room, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his best jacket, the one he usually saved for church. Through the crack in the door, he could see familiar faces. Mrs. Peterson from the grocery store, Coach Williams from Lily's school, and dozens of others who had praised him as a hero just weeks ago. Now their expressions were tight with suspicion. Evelyn Harrow paced beside him, her elegant gray suit perfectly pressed, but her fingers wouldn't stop fidgeting with her pearl necklace. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at them all out there." "You can," Daniel said firmly. "You have to." He glanced at his watch. 5 minutes until the meeting would start. His daughter Lily was safe at her best friend's house, thank goodness. She didn't need to witness this. The mayor's assistant poked her head in. "Mrs. Harrow, Mr. Carter, we're ready for you." Daniel felt his stomach clench as they walked onto the small raised platform. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes following their every move. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and someone coughed in the back row. The mayor stood at the podium, looking uncertain. "Thank you all for coming tonight," the mayor began. his voice carrying through the speakers. Mrs. Evelyn Harrow has requested this special town meeting to make an important statement. Evelyn approached the podium, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. Her hands shook as she placed her notes down, but when she looked up, her chin was held high, the pearls at her throat trembled with each breath. "My friends and neighbors," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat and started again, stronger this time. 3 months ago, I stood outside Wilson's grocery and was supposedly attacked by 2 men who tried to steal my purse. Many of you read about it in the papers. You celebrated Daniel Carter as a hero for coming to my rescue. The crowd stirred. Daniel could feel the tension rising like a physical force. What you don't know, what I've been too ashamed to admit, is that the entire incident was staged. Evelyn's words fell like stones into still water. Gasps rippled through the audience. I hired those men. I orchestrated the whole thing. The silence shattered. People began talking all at once, their voices rising in anger and disbelief. Someone shouted, "I knew it!" from the back of the room. The mayor banged his gavel, calling for order. Evelyn gripped the podium tighter, her knuckles white. "Please, let me finish." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "Since my husband died 2 years ago, I've been lost. The loneliness was crushing. I felt invisible, forgotten. In my desperation to feel something, anything, I made a terrible decision. I thought if I could create a moment of drama, of excitement." She paused, swallowing hard. "I never expected anyone to actually intervene." Daniel watched as tears began rolling down her cheeks, leaving trails in her carefully applied makeup. The crowd had grown quiet again, hanging on her every word. But Daniel Carter did intervene. He put himself in harm's way to help someone he thought was in danger. He is every bit the hero you believed him to be. More so, because he had no part in my deception. He knew nothing about it until I confessed to him weeks later. Murmurs swept through the room. Daniel could see some faces softening, while others remained hard with judgment. When the truth began to leak out, Daniel lost job opportunities. People questioned his character. His daughter faced whispers at school. Evelyn's voice grew stronger with determination, but none of that was his fault. The blame lies entirely with me. She turned slightly, meeting Daniel's eyes for a moment before facing the crowd again. "I stand before you today not just to clear Daniel's name, but to beg your forgiveness. What I did was selfish, foolish, and wrong. I betrayed this community's trust. I manipulated your emotions. Her voice finally broke completely. "I am so deeply sorry." The silence in the room was absolute. Evelyn's shoulders began to shake with quiet sobs. Daniel couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. The simple gesture seemed to echo through the hall. Evelyn looked up at him through tear-filled eyes, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. Her next words came out as barely more than a whisper, but in the dead silence, everyone could hear them. "Please, can you ever forgive me?" She gripped the podium, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright, her proud posture finally giving way to the weight of her shame. Daniel's hand remained steady on her shoulder, offering silent support even as the room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The silence in the town hall hung heavy as lead. Hundreds of eyes stared at Daniel and Evelyn on the wooden stage, some filled with anger, others with confusion. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he stepped up to the microphone, but his voice came out steady and clear. "I know many of you came here tonight expecting answers," he began, his work-worn hands gripping the podium. "And you deserve them. But first, I want to tell you about something that happened last week." He paused, scanning the faces before him. In the third row, he spotted Lily sitting with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had offered to watch her during the meeting. His daughter's presence gave him strength. "I was fixing Mrs. Peterson's fence, the white one on Maple Street. Her grandson Tommy, he's about 6, came running out to watch me work. He had this toy hammer, following everything I did. When I made a mistake and had to pull out some nails, Tommy looked up at me and said, 'It's okay, Mr. Carter. My dad says everyone makes mistakes.'" A few quiet chuckles rippled through the crowd. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Out of the mouths of babes, right? But Tommy's dad is right. We all make mistakes. Some small, like putting a nail in the wrong spot. Others." He glanced at Evelyn, who sat with her head bowed. "Others are bigger, much bigger." The room grew still again as Daniel continued. "When I ran toward those men that day at the grocery store, I wasn't thinking about being a hero. I was thinking about my daughter, about what kind of world I wanted her to live in. A world where people help each other, where we stand up for what's right." His voice grew stronger. "But you know what? Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about charging at danger. Sometimes it's about having the courage to face the truth, even when it hurts, even when it might cost you everything. Daniel stepped away from the podium, walking closer to the edge of the stage. Mrs. Harrow made a terrible mistake. She was drowning in loneliness, trying to find a way to matter in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. What she did was wrong. She knows that better than anyone now. But her biggest act of courage wasn't that day at the grocery store. It was today, standing here, telling the truth. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel saw some people nodding slowly, while others still wore frowns of disapproval. "I've spent the last few weeks angry," he admitted. "Angry that my reputation was built on a lie. Angry that my daughter's pride in me might turn to shame. But then I realized something. The real test of character isn't in never making mistakes. It's in how we face them, how we make them right." Tears glistened in his eyes as he turned to look at Evelyn. Mrs. Harrow could have kept silent. She could have let me take the fall when rumors started spreading. Instead, she chose to face the music, to tell the truth, knowing it would cost her everything, her reputation, her standing in this community, maybe even her friends. He turned back to the crowd, his voice thick with emotion. "That's the kind of courage I want my daughter to see. The courage to admit when we're wrong, the courage to make things right, no matter the cost." Daniel saw Lily wiping her eyes, and Mrs. Thompson holding her close. In that moment, his heart swelled with love and certainty. So yes, I forgive Mrs. Harrow, not because what she did was right, it wasn't, but because she had the courage to tell the truth, because she's working every day to make amends, and because I believe in second chances. This whole town gave me one when I was struggling to make ends meet. He walked over to where Evelyn sat and extended his hand to her. She looked up at him through tear-filled eyes. "The truth is, we're all broken in some way. We all need grace sometimes. And maybe, just maybe, the real heroes aren't the ones who never fall. Maybe they're the ones who have the courage to get back up and face the truth." The silence in the room was different now, thoughtful, heavy with emotion. Daniel saw tissues being passed around, saw heads nodding, saw hands reaching out to squeeze neighbors' shoulders. "So I'm asking you, not just to forgive Mrs. Harrow, but to learn from her courage, to remember that it's never too late to tell the truth, to make things right, to start again." As his words faded into silence, someone in the back began to clap. The sound spread slowly at first, then faster, building into a wave of applause that filled the hall. Evelyn, overwhelmed by the moment, rose shakily to her feet. Her legs gave way, but Daniel caught her, supporting her as she wept against his shoulder. The applause grew louder, thunderous now, echoing off the walls of the town hall. Through his own tears, Daniel could see people standing, row by row, until the entire room was on its feet, not just applauding, but embracing each other, wiping away tears, nodding with understanding and forgiveness. In that moment, as he held the trembling form of Evelyn Harrow, Daniel realized that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen not in moments of danger, but in moments of grace. And sometimes, the truth, though painful, could heal more deeply than any lie ever could. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Daniel's small kitchen as he stared at the newspaper spread across his table. His own face looked back at him from the front page, alongside Evelyn's tearful confession from yesterday's town hall meeting. The headline read, "Staged robbery revealed. Local hero's integrity shines through." Daniel's coffee had gone cold, forgotten as he read through the article for the third time. His phone buzzed constantly with messages, some apologetic, others supportive. He turned it face down, needing a moment of quiet to process everything. A knock at the door made him jump. It was Tom Wheeler, the construction company owner who had withdrawn a job offer last week when the rumors started swirling. "Daniel," Tom shifted his weight uncomfortably on the porch. "I owe you an apology. I jumped to conclusions without hearing the whole story." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression guarded. Tom cleared his throat and continued, "That took real courage yesterday, both standing up for the truth and showing forgiveness like that. We need more men like you on our crew." He pulled out a contract from his jacket. "The foreman position is yours if you still want it." A weight lifted from Daniel's shoulders. "Thank you, Tom, I do." Across town, Evelyn sat in her usually empty living room, surrounded by a dozen bouquets. Some came with notes of support, others with harsh words about her deception. She picked up one card that simply read, "Thank you for your bravery in telling the truth." It was signed by Sarah Matthews, one of the mothers from Lily's school. The doorbell chimed. Martha from the food pantry stood there, arms crossed but eyes soft. "Well, are you coming?" The morning shift starts in 20 minutes. Evelyn blinked in surprise. You still want me to volunteer? You made a mistake and owned up to it, Martha said firmly. Besides, you're the best we've got at organizing the donation records. Now, come on. At the elementary school, Daniel walked Lily to her classroom, his stomach tight with worry about how the other kids might treat her. But as they approached, Mrs. Anderson, Lily's teacher, hurried over. Mr. Carter, I want you to know we had a class discussion this morning about telling the truth and forgiveness. She smiled warmly. The parents have been calling all morning, asking how they can help make things right. Ginny Palmer's mother touched Daniel's arm as she dropped off her daughter. I'm so sorry for how I acted last week, avoiding you at pickup time. I should have known better. Throughout the morning, more people approached Daniel. The grocery store manager offered him a gift card to help with expenses. The librarian who had given him suspicious looks last week now invited Lily to join the weekend reading program. Even Mr. Hopkins, the grumpy hardware store owner who had canceled Daniel's handyman contracts, called to reinstate their agreement. At the food pantry, Evelyn worked tirelessly, organizing boxes and updating inventory lists. Her perfectly manicured nails were chipped, and her designer clothes were dusty, but her eyes shone with purpose. When a young single mother came in, looking embarrassed and lost, Evelyn gently showed her around, sharing her own story of learning humility and finding redemption. We all need help sometimes, Evelyn told the young woman. The real strength is in being honest about it. The local news station sent a reporter to do a follow-up story. They found Daniel at work, already directing his new construction crew. The reporter asked how it felt to be vindicated. Daniel wiped his brow and thought carefully before answering. This isn't about vindication. It's about community, about how we treat each other when mistakes are made, about choosing truth over pride and forgiveness over anger. By afternoon, the mood in town had shifted. Where there had been whispers and accusations, there were now conversations about second chances and redemption. The coffee shop put up a sign offering free coffee to our local hero, the real kind. The community center posted about starting a single-parent support group. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Hope Haven, the downtown shelter Evelyn had started funding. The scent of fresh paint filled the air as Daniel carefully rolled another coat of warm yellow onto the walls of what would soon be the shelter's reading room. His weathered hands moved with practiced ease, making sure each stroke was even and thorough. Nearby, Lily sat cross-legged on a drop cloth, surrounded by children's books they'd brought to stock the shelves. Her small fingers traced the colorful covers as she organized them into neat piles, humming softly to herself. Evelyn stood on a stepladder, painting the trim around the windows with meticulous care. She'd traded her usual elegant attire for worn jeans and an oversized button-down shirt. Her silver hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Paint speckled her clothes and even dotted her cheeks, but she didn't seem to mind. You missed a spot, Daniel called out teasingly, pointing to a corner near the ceiling. Evelyn squinted up at it and chuckled. Well, if someone wasn't hoarding the extension roller. I offered to do the high parts, Daniel reminded her, setting down his roller and walking over to steady her ladder. You're the one who insisted on doing it yourself, and I stand by that decision, Evelyn replied, stretching to reach the missed spot. Though, I must admit, painting isn't quite as easy as I remembered. When was the last time you painted a room? Daniel asked, genuinely curious. Evelyn paused, her brush hovering mid-stroke. George and I painted our first apartment together right after we were married. Must have been 40 years ago now. Her voice softened with memory. We made such a mess of it, ended up with more paint on ourselves than the walls. Daniel noticed the familiar shadow cross her face whenever she mentioned her late husband. He sounds like he was a good man. The best, Evelyn said quietly, climbing down from the ladder. She walked over to where Lily sat and lowered herself onto the drop cloth beside her. What have you got there, sweetheart? Lily held up a picture book. It's about a lonely elephant who makes friends with a mouse. Can I read it to you? I'd love that. Evelyn smiled, patting the space next to her. Daniel watched them together as he cleaned his roller. The sight of Evelyn, who'd once orchestrated an elaborate deception just to feel noticed, now sitting on the floor in paint-stained clothes, listening intently as a 7-year-old read to her, made his heart swell with a mixture of pride and gratitude. You know, he said, joining them on the floor, I've been meaning to thank you, Evelyn. Not just for all this, he gestured around the room, but for showing Lily what real courage looks like. Evelyn looked up, surprised. Me? Yes, you. Owning up to your mistakes, working to make things right, that's not easy. But you did it anyway. I had a good example to follow, Evelyn replied softly, meeting his eyes. Your forgiveness? It changed everything. Sometimes people just need a chance to start over, Daniel said, remembering his own struggles after Lily's mother left. God knows I've needed plenty of second chances myself. Lily looked up from her book. Daddy says everybody makes mistakes, but it's what you do after that matters. Evelyn's eyes grew misty. Your daddy is very wise. She reached out and gently smoothed Lily's hair. And you, my dear, have taught me more about joy than I've learned in all my years. How come? Lily asked, curious. Because you see the world with such open eyes and such a loving heart, Evelyn explained. When I lost George, I forgot how to do that. I wrapped myself up in sadness and loneliness until I couldn't see anything else. Daniel nodded, understanding. Grief can do that to a person. But you know what helped me remember? Evelyn continued, giving Lily's hand a squeeze. Watching you draw pictures for your father. Hearing you laugh when we bake cookies together. Seeing how you welcome everyone at the shelter with that beautiful smile of yours. Lily beamed at the praise, then turned serious. Do you still miss Mr. George? Every day, Evelyn admitted. But now I can remember the happy times too, and I'm learning to make new happy memories, thanks to friends like you and your father. Daniel cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. Speaking of memories, we should probably get this room finished before it gets dark. These walls won't paint themselves. They all stood up, Lily carefully marking her place in the book before setting it aside. Evelyn picked up her brush again, but paused to look around the room, at the fresh paint bringing new life to old walls, at Lily's careful arrangements of books, at Daniel's steady presence beside her. You remind me of the joy I thought I'd lost, she whispered, placing a gentle hand on Lily's head. The autumn breeze rustled through the colorful banners decorating the community center's courtyard. Tables lined with donation boxes and informational pamphlets created neat rows where volunteers bustled about, their name tags catching the afternoon sunday. Evelyn Harrow stood behind the registration desk, her silver hair elegantly styled and her warm smile genuine as she greeted each arrival. Daniel Carter moved between the tables, his work-worn hands helping to organize supplies while keeping one eye on his daughter Lily. The 7-year-old darted from person to person, clutching a decorated donation bucket, her pigtails bouncing with each step. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. Lily beamed as an elderly woman dropped a check into her bucket. This helps other kids like me. Daniel's heart swelled watching her. Gone was the uncertainty that had clouded her eyes during the scandal months ago. Now she radiated confidence, secure in knowing her father was exactly the hero she'd always believed him to be. Your daughter is a natural at this, Evelyn said, appearing at Daniel's side. She's charmed half the town into emptying their wallets. Daniel chuckled. She learned from the best. He nodded toward Evelyn, who had spent the past months throwing herself into community service with the same determination she'd once used to maintain her social status. The mayor approached the podium set up at the front of the courtyard, tapping the microphone. The crowd of about 200 people gradually quieted, taking seats in the rows of folding chairs. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor began, welcome to our first annual Single Parent Support Initiative fundraiser. Today marks a special moment in our community's history. Evelyn squeezed Daniel's arm gently before making her way to the front. She stood tall, her designer outfit a sharp contrast to the simple folding chairs and paper decorations, but her humility showed in her eyes. As many of you know, the mayor continued, Mrs. Evelyn Harrow has established a remarkable new program. The Thomas Harrow Memorial Scholarship Fund will provide educational and housing assistance to single parents in our community who are working to build better lives for their children. Applause rippled through the crowd. Lily abandoned her donation bucket to climb onto Daniel's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. That's for people like us, right, Daddy? She whispered. That's right, sweetheart, he answered, holding her close. The mayor gestured to Evelyn, who took the podium. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. Thomas, my late husband, believed in second chances, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. He believed that one mistake shouldn't define a person's entire life. It took me. She paused, meeting Daniel's eyes in the crowd. Some difficult lessons to truly understand what he meant. Several people nodded, remembering the town hall confession that had shocked them all months ago. But today, there was no judgment in their faces, only respect for how she'd worked to make things right. This scholarship fund, Evelyn continued, will help parents who, like Daniel Carter, put their children first and work tirelessly to provide them with opportunities. Daniel? She gestured for him to join her. Daniel kissed Lily's forehead and set her down before walking to the podium. The same people who had once whispered accusations now smiled warmly at him. Thank you, Evelyn, he said, his deep voice carrying across the courtyard. You know, when people call someone a hero, they often picture big dramatic moments. But I've learned that real heroism is about the courage to face truth, to admit mistakes, and to choose to do better. He turned to Evelyn. Mrs. Harrow showed that kind of courage. She could have hidden behind her wealth and influence. Instead, she chose to transform a mistake into something that will help countless families. That's heroism too. Lily started clapping first, and soon the whole crowd joined in. Evelyn dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, touched by Daniel's words. The mayor returned to announce the initial funding amount, which drew gasps of appreciation from the crowd. Evelyn had committed a substantial portion of her fortune to the cause. As people rose to their feet applauding, Lily ran forward to hug both her father and Evelyn. "Can we help pick the families who get help?" Lily asked eagerly. Evelyn laughed, a sound of pure joy that would have been unthinkable in her old life of careful social calculations. "I think that's an excellent idea, dear. Your father and I will be on the selection committee, and we could use an assistant with such a big heart." The crowd began to mingle, writing checks and filling out volunteer forms. Daniel watched as Evelyn moved among them, no longer the isolated widow in her mansion, but a vital part of the community. When she caught his eye across the courtyard, they shared a look of profound gratitude for second chances, for forgiveness, and for the unexpected friendship that had grown from the ashes of deception. The mayor raised his voice over the happy chatter. "Let's hear it one more time for Mrs. Harrow and Mr. Carter." The crowd erupted in cheers, their enthusiasm echoing off the community center walls. Evelyn and Daniel stood together, united in their commitment to turning past mistakes into future hope, while Lily danced between them, her face glowing with pride in both her father and her new friend. The autumn breeze rustled through the changing leaves as Daniel spread a checkered blanket across the grass. Lily bounced around him, her pigtails swaying with each excited hop. Evelyn carefully lowered herself onto the blanket, smoothing her casual slacks, a far cry from the formal attire she once thought necessary for every public appearance. "Can I set up the plates, Daddy?" Lily asked, already reaching for the wicker picnic basket. "Sure thing, sweetheart." Daniel smiled, watching his daughter carefully arrange paper plates in a perfect triangle. Her small hands moved with determination, making sure everything was just right. The playground across the park echoed with children's laughter. A few months ago, Evelyn would have avoided such a public setting, too afraid of judgmental glances. Now, she felt a gentle peace settle over her as she helped Lily unpack sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. "I made these myself," Lily announced proudly, pointing to the slightly lopsided peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. "Daddy only helped a little bit." "They look absolutely wonderful," Evelyn said, accepting one with genuine appreciation. She took a bite and smiled. "Perfect amount of jelly." Daniel watched the interaction, amazed at how natural it felt now. The woman who had once orchestrated an elaborate deception was now sitting cross-legged on a picnic blanket, praising a 7-year-old's sandwich-making skills with complete sincerity. "Remember when we first met?" Evelyn asked softly, her eyes distant. "I was so lost then, so desperate to matter that I created chaos just to feel something." Daniel nodded, carefully wiping grape jelly from Lily's chin with a napkin. "We've all come a long way since then. I never thought telling the truth would set me free," Evelyn continued, watching a group of birds hop nearby. "I was terrified of exposure, of judgment, but now," she gestured to the peaceful scene around them, "now I have real purpose, real connections." Lily looked up from her sandwich, her face serious. "Miss Evelyn, are you sad about before?" Evelyn's breath caught for a moment. Even now, Lily's innocent directness could pierce right through to her heart. "Yes, dear, I am sad about the choices I made. But I'm also grateful because making things right helped me find true friendship with you and your father." Daniel reached over and squeezed Evelyn's hand. "Sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us to our greatest blessings, if we're brave enough to face them." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching the shadows lengthen across the grass. Lily got up occasionally to chase butterflies, her giggles carrying on the wind. Each time she returned to the blanket, she seemed to sit a little closer to Evelyn. "The scholarship program is really making a difference," Daniel said, breaking the quiet. "I saw Sarah Miller yesterday. She's going back to nursing school because of it." Evelyn's eyes brightened. "Thomas would have loved that. He always believed in giving people second chances." She paused, her voice softening. "Just like you did with me." "Well," Daniel replied, gathering empty plates, "everyone deserves a chance to make things right. You taught me that sometimes the bravest thing isn't charging in to save someone. It's having the courage to admit when you're wrong." The sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Lily had settled down, her energy finally waning as she nestled against her father's side. The evening air grew cooler, and Evelyn wrapped a light sweater around her shoulders. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was thoughtful, almost sleepy. "Yes, Princess? I'm glad you helped Miss Evelyn tell the truth, and I'm glad she's our friend now." Daniel stroked his daughter's hair, his heart full. "Me too, sweetheart." "You know what?" Lily continued, her eyes growing heavy. She snuggled closer to Daniel, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Daddy, you're my real hero for telling the truth." Evelyn quickly dabbed at her eyes, not bothering to hide her smile as she watched father and daughter together. These moments, simple, honest, and full of love, were worth more than all the attention she'd once desperately craved. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.